If you've experienced something unbelievably weird and unexplainable that left you feeling isolated and afraid, the Paranormal PTSD Recovery Podcast is for you. Each week, we go from haunting to healing by focusing on one of our three core focal points: personal stories, healing tips, and understanding the unknown. We help you to know that you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you can heal. Now here's your hostess, Laura Giles. We are back with Steve Aspin today, author of Out of Time, a book about the intergenerational abduction program and lifelong experiencer of the abduction phenomenon. It is so nice to be back with you again. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Laura.
We had laid the groundwork now. We've talked about that people are being abducted and that it is an intergenerational thing. It is a breeding program. I really just want to start with what are the implications of that, because this is affecting millions of people. So what are the implications for abductees and non-abductees, do you think?
Implications. Abductees just accept it as part of their lives, or 95% of them, I would say, are not even aware that they're abductees. They just think they have strange lives, and they know that they're not like other people, or they get obsessive attachments to religions or spiritualism and so forth, or they tried several different things, and they're always drawn to the other non-physical side of life. And those who realize that they're being abducted by these entities find out everything they can about it, or everything they want to know about it, and then they try to readjust themselves to engage with what they see as normal life. You know, they might have things that interest them other than being abducted. Like I'm really interested in music. You know, as an example, is my guitar collection over there. And I'm 68 now, so I don't. For several years I kind of went away from my interest in making music and left it on the shelf, so to speak, and pursued this. I had a different profession in a different discipline. I ran a business which designed and manufactured surgical equipment, and ran that business very successfully for nearly 20 years. So I was really busy then. And when I started investigating the abduction issue and talking to other researchers about it, and going to conferences and meeting up with other people and finding out as much as I can and reading tons and tons of books about the subject, I really had no time to pursue these other areas that interested me. But as I'm aging now, and I've kind of adjusted to the abduction issue being a real thing that affects me and my family over the years, I've attempted to re-engage with these things, these kind of hobby, pastime, arty side of my life. And that's what a lot of abductees do. Once they get accustomed to the fact that this has been happening to them, and they discover the essential characteristics of it, they manage to adjust themselves to not talking about that, but still recognizing it's going on, and forcing themselves or allowing themselves to engage with other areas of their lives that they find interesting, like any other regular person would find interesting. You're not obsessed about the alien abduction thing. We can study the subject for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and then kind of recognize that I know that's what's been happening to me, and I know it's a really big issue, and I know that it affects a lot of other people. But I've got so many years left in my life, and I want to really concentrate on this now. Just read all the books that I wanted to read, and I'm very interested in nature conservation and so forth. So people kind of attach themselves to other things that regular people do, And at the same time, they know deep down that this abduction stuff is going on with them, and they just decide that they're not going to look into it anymore because they kind of know all they want to know about it.
I'd certainly respect that. And one of the things that struck me full in the face as I was reading this book is so I do genealogy, and
Okay.
on one leg of my family there are slaves and slave owners. And I have one person who I can trace their DNA. I have 300 cousins by this one person. And it's because he
300
was
cousins.
300 cousins that are DNA tested. So imagine how many I have that were not DNA tested, all from this one man
Jeez.
who raped slaves and had all of these kids.
How many
So
generations back was that from you now?
um, I'm not quite sure. Let's see, five or six. It's five or
Yeah,
six
because
generations back.
this would certainly not be after the 1860s, would it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So if people are being abducted, their egg and sperm are being taken and they're being
Hmm.
used for some breeding program to make hybrids and their DNA is being altered in some way. I it hits me that I could have 500 babies out there, or I could have, how many
Oh yeah,
cousins, and
yeah,
that's astounding.
yeah. It can get shocking and depressing in equal measure if you internalize it enough. And I sometimes appear to be kind of cool about this whole thing, but that's just because I've been dealing with it for so long. It doesn't really shock me anymore. And if it doesn't develop into anything with a global visible presence, in other words, that if they come out in the open and it remains like under the surface, like a covert program, then I'll be perfectly happy to live and die before it changes, because most abductees who are become aware that that's what's happening to them, although their opinions and ideas about this program differ between them, they all virtually all of them think that it's going somewhere and it's being done for a purpose, and eventually there'll be big change to the human race, which is brought about by the instigators of this program. And it certainly seems like they're investing an enormous amount of time and resources into this thing, and there must be a reason why they want to do all this, because
Yes.
the numbers are enormous, and the procedures are very complex, and the instrumentation they're using is very precisely manufactured, and they're very careful about their security and extremely cautious about revealing themselves, and very controlling about what they allow abductees to see and do, when they're under their custody. So there's a big program going on, which is prosecuted with extreme thoroughness, and it's very, very highly orchestrated. There's a lot of things in the public domain and conspiracy theories, if you like, that governments, people in government or in the secret governments, in the security, the intel services, all these people in the black programs and so forth know what's going on with this program, and they want to keep it undercover for some reason. They like whether they want to prevent panic, or whether they want to just ridicule it and make sure the ridicule factor is continued. People have all sorts of ideas about that. Everything you can imagine is the opinion of somebody, but I don't know how deep that goes. I do know that the first edition of my book, Out of Time, was taken off the market on the 31st of March 2023. And do you know anything about this?
Yes, we talked about
You
it.
do. You do. I couldn't remember. So, there's a number of the things that I'm forced to confront following that incident. And I try to be as non-conspiratorial as possible. but somebody somewhere did not want that book for sale up through those particular channels, and I was forced to republish it. Now, nobody has interfered with the second edition in any way, and probably because they physically can't, because I'm using a small UK publisher, and I'm putting it out through 1,000 channels and distributors, so it's almost impossible to stop its circulation. But when I published it through Amazon, they all had all the printing of the paperback under their complete control, all the distribution under their control, and all the sales were under the umbrella of Amazon. So it was relatively easy to stop it. And I was never given any explanation as to why. It was just withdrawn from sale. It should sound like a load of BS when it was explained to me, but the people who explained it to me didn't know any more than I did. Anyway, so there seems to be some efforts in some parts of the business world, the intelligence agencies, that really would prefer this not to be talked about too much.
Which is why I think we need to talk about it, because the secrecy thing really bothers me. As a trauma therapist, so I worked with domestic violence and sexual assault at first. And that's the first thing we would tell people, is that you have to talk about this. The secrecy is what allows the violence to continue. And this is what is allowing all of this to continue. So, I mean, I know there's all kinds of ways that the conversation can go, and some of them make more sense than others. But I think everything needs to be talked about, because I don't think that it serves anybody to keep this a secret. Now, especially because the name of your book is Out of Time. And in the book, you say that it was revealed to you that a virus would bring about a big change. And I was wondering, do you think that virus is COVID, or is it something else?
I don't think it was COVID-19. No, I don't see. That's just something that a hybrid said to me at one time. She said that we'll release a virus into the atmosphere, and some people will respond positively to it and some people won't. And see, one of the things is possible is that this individual doesn't know a lot about it. They just have basic outline information. So she was just, kind of talking to me about this. She's felt rather close to me, so she would reveal that. See what is meant by a virus might not be biologically what we would understand a virus to be. It might be something completely different. It might be something electromagnetic, which interacts with the brain. It might be, but not something biological. So I don't know what it is, but I know of abductees that have been told that when the program started in about 130 years ago, it was the early abductees were chosen when a virus was seeded into the atmosphere, and those who responded in a certain way were abducted, and those who failed to respond or ignored it were just left alone. So that's how they chose the first generation of abductees. But that, I don't know if that is accurate or not. I mean, if abductees tell you stuff, they're just reporting what they've been told by the aliens, and they lie a lot. They lie and mislead a lot. So we just can't rely on anything like that, really.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Well, one of the things that we do know is the story in your book about the guy who was sexually assaulted by hybrids, and they left hair, which was then tested.
Oh, that was in my house. I wasn't sexually assaulted.
No. That was you?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. It's in chapter 4. The hair.
Yes.
if you read chapter 4, the last part of chapter 4, it's called Hair of the Alien. Yeah, the Hair of the Alien.
Yes.
And what happened was I was late in the evening in 2015. We weren't living in our current house at that time. We were living in a house in Hertfordshire, in a village in Hertfordshire near Hemel Hempstead. And late in the evening, my wife goes to bed a bit earlier than I do. I was still up reading something on the computer, I think, or maybe I was reading a book. But I remember getting immensely drowsy and leaning back in the chair, and I recognize what's going on when that happens, because usually it's the unconsciousness follows, and I wake up a couple of hours later feeling very irritable. So I knew that something was going on. There was something outside that I could sense. And before unconsciousness overcame me, it's very, very pleasant that, you know, when you're drifting off to sleep and you just feel, lovely, you know. I remember we had double glazed glass doors, 7 feet high and, you know, about 10 feet wide, that opened onto the garden so you could walk out straight out of the house onto the patio. And these doors were locked because it was late at night. And this entity walked through the glass doors, and beside her was another an alien. He was like a young man who looked maybe a little bit short for a young man. Maybe he's 5 foot tall, 5'2" or something. And he had conventional chinos on and shoes, you know, and really ordinary looking. And she was not quite ordinary looking. She was a little taller, and she was very, very skinny. And she had a lightweight dress on, very baggy dress, like a big, you know, maybe a big night dress, but very pale kind of creamy color. And she had hair down to about here. Straggly hair, looked very unkempt. And they walked into the middle of the room, and that's the last thing I remember, because I went unconscious. And I woke up 2 hours later and turned the lights off and went to bed. And I felt really tired and irritable. And the next day, my wife noticed that I was very irritable and very awkward to be with, and I was preoccupied with something. And she said, "Did you have an incident last night? Did something happen?" I said, "Yeah, probably did," or something. I went out for a cycle ride because I think it's maybe a Saturday or Sunday. So I didn't go to the office. I went out for a cycle ride. When I came back, she said she was just looking around the room, and she'd found a hair about that long, about 11 or 12 inches. And it was like a blonde hair or silver colored hair. And it was on the carpet underneath the dining table. Neither she nor I have hair like that. And we had no visitors for about 4 or 5 weeks previously. And we had no pets at that time. We have a dog now, but we didn't used to have one. And we knew that this hair was shouldn't be there. Later on, she was out in the garden watering the plants, and she found a second hair, which was almost identical to the first one, on the patio outside the house. I remember the doors were locked all evening and all night. So she found one hair inside the room and one hair outside in the garden. And I don't know how she saw that statement. She got an intuition about where to look, you know, and what to notice. So we had these 2 hairs, and I had a feeling that they'd come from this entity that had entered the room the night before. And it took us maybe a year to find out where to send them. And we eventually was helped by somebody else in America who's helped us out with this. We found Microtrace LLC in Illinois, and they're a forensics lab in Illinois, and they analyzed these 2 hairs, which we sent them by express mail, secure mail, And they also had a different hair from a different abductee, who I understand might have been in California. So like 5,000 miles from where we live in Hemel Hempstead, you know. And this hair was not like the ones we found. This hair was like very dark brown. So the report is in the book, in the forensic report is in the book. And all three hairs, well, the one hair from California was a polypropylene hair, typically used in cheap costume wigs. And the two hairs that we found in our house in our garden were real human hairs, but they were bleached and dyed in the way that wig hairs are bleached and dyed. And they were also adjudged to be from wigs. So these two abduction events, 6,000 miles apart and several months separated, very different characteristics. One was like this long, maybe 2.5 feet long, and it was brown. And two of them that we found that were maybe 11 inches long, and they were colorless. Weren't actually colorless. They were bleached with something which had left a blue tint, a bluish dye in them, and that's how wigs are treated prior to them being colored, so that you then make it blonde, or you can make it black, or whatever color hair you want the wig to have, wig to be. But it's prior to that they're treated in this way. So it looks like it was a wig that wasn't colored, but it had been bleached and was prepared. It was acquired in the middle of the process of manufacture somehow. Now, make of it what you will.
That is really strange.
We have the forensic report in the book, and we have a spectral analysis of the hairs, and the story is of how they were acquired and how they found their way to microtrace, and so forth is explained. So that's the facts, the forensic facts I can lay on the table, that how these hairs were where they came from, how they arrived in our house, and how they were analyzed by whom, and with what result. Yeah.
So hybrids have hair issues.
This one had a wig on, without question. She looked like she had a wig on, but I didn't actually think that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But thinking back, I can tell that the hairs that we found in the car from the garden and in the house were hairs from this wig. I mean, they looked exactly the same. They looked exactly the same color, exactly the same consistency, exactly the same length. So they didn't have a root bulb.
It's so strange.
They didn't have a root bulb. They just had two ends split at both ends.
So I'm thinking about
this. They came out somehow.
So if it's a hybrid and they bought this wig from a store or maybe online, then that means they're interacting with our physical world.
If they did that, yeah, it does mean that. It does mean that. Yeah.
So they're here.
Or, one of them visited a theatrical supply shop, or we don't know, the analysis, that's what we found, and that's what the analysis revealed. And I don't know how they acquired it, or how they got hold of it and kept it. I've just I can't even speculate about that. They were obviously interacting with the human world somehow.
Yes.
So,
yes.
You think theatrical supply shop or something, or a wig shop or a wig manufacturer or something. They obviously got it from somewhere, or they just took it from somebody who had it.
Could be, yeah.
Who had it in their bedroom. They just walked off with it. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know how they got it.
Well, I was thinking about the other wig or hair story about the guy who had it wrapped around his penis.
Oh, Peter Corey.
Yes, Peter Corey.
He was an immigrant to Australia, New South Wales, from Lebanon. This happened in 1992, and it's a famous case actually. And he woke up. He'd been assaulted at work when he was selling cement or concrete. That was his business. and he was physically assaulted, violently assaulted by a guy with a shovel on a building site, and it caused him head injuries, and he had to take several months off work because he was unable to do anything. And during this period, he got up early and drove his wife to a railway station, which is quite close, and then went back home and went back to bed for his convalescence. He was able to do that, and just then have a half a day in bed and take painkillers. And when he woke up, he had these two naked females sitting on the bedclothes or kneeling on the bedclothes, staring at him. And he had an interaction with one of them who tried to, and he said he didn't know, they didn't speak, but he had a mental impression, babies, babies, babies in his mind. And one of them pushed his head onto her breast and he bit it. And he said afterwards, he said he had no idea why he did that. He just said that he just wanted to communicate to them that he didn't want this because it was gross, And a little bit of her nipple lodged in his throat, and he was coughing furiously for 3 days, couldn't get rid of it, and eventually the irritation ceased, so he either swallowed it or it was absorbed or something. And anyway, he was furiously coughing in the bathroom, and when he came back to the bedroom, they'd gone. These two entities had gone, and he never saw them again. But when in the bathroom, he discovered a blonde hair had been tied around his penis. It wound round, and it said it really hurt when he tried to get it off, when he tried to untie it. But he did untie it, and he stuck it in a freezer bag that's like a soft polythene bag with a Ziploc, and he put it in the drawer, and he didn't tell his wife about it. Wonder why.
Right.
But he didn't tell his wife about it, and he just kind of semi-forgot about it, but he was kind of intrigued if he could ever have it analysed. And he met an Australian UFO researcher called Bill Chalker, who was a fairly well-known figure in Australia to people who are interested in the UFO subject. Having talked to Bill Chalker a couple of times, he gave him these hairs that Chalker then had analysed at a laboratory in Australia. And he wrote a book about this called Hair of the Alien, about the Corey case. And there is an analysis of this hair that he found coiled around his equipment. There's an analysis of that hair in the book, which is more thorough and more enlightening than the analysis I got from Microtrace about our hairs, because this hair was not a wig. It had a very exotic genetic profile. So I used that case, described that case in its bare bones outline, and the resulting analysis of the hair in Australia and New South Wales as an introduction to my hair story. I'm sorry, I know what you were talking about, the Corey case. That's really obvious now. But that's really well known. I mean, the Corey case is very well known by people who are interested in the subject, whereas my wig hairs story is probably not well known. I mean, nobody knows about it except Microtrace and David Jacobs, and a couple of other people who were involved in this in this project to get them analyzed.
And what jumped out about that story to me was the fact that the DNA appeared to be genetically modified to give protective factors against certain viruses.
Yeah. The analysis said that it had. I'm not a geneticist, but genome was such that when you have two markers for a gene, for a particular gene, if they're different, then they're called A and B, and if they're the same, they're either A or B. And this hair had a number of genetic markers that are, I don't have the correct language in my mind about it. As I said, I'm not a geneticist, but if you have the smallpox virus or the HIV virus or any other really serious pathogen, they have to attach themselves to one of these genetic markers. If there are two the same, then and the smallpox virus attaches them to B only, and they're both A, you won't catch it. This is why in history, when smallpox was a big issue, 1/4 of the population who were exposed to it never caught it. Even if they were nursing another family member who caught it, they didn't seem to catch it. So this seemed to be engineered so that this individual would never catch smallpox, would never contract the HIV virus, would never contract a number of other pathogens. And it seemed to be engineered in that way. But you can speculate about that all day and not know for sure whether it's just an accident of some kind, genetic aberration, or whether it was intentional. But that's what they found.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what's so fun and maybe not fun about
Interesting choice of word there, Laura.
Yeah, I mean, you can go in all kinds of directions and none of them may be right.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but I do think that we need to talk about this. I think there are implications because your book is called Out of Time. So it's called Out of Time for a reason. Why did you choose that?
Yeah, because it's got more than one meaning. The obvious meaning is we might be out of time to do anything about this if it's been covertly prosecuted for so many decades and so many millions of people have been involved in this, and they've managed to engineer a hybrid race from this program, and they're obviously planning to have a permanent presence here, because otherwise they wouldn't bother making sure that hybrids are as a precise looking like humans as possible. Because what abductees report when they interact with what they call first generation hybrids or second generation hybrids is they look really strange. They can be they can have big eyes, sometimes completely black eyes, not like our eyes with the whites at the end, and they can be really weird looking, and they can be really skinny, and they can have elongated fingers like 3 times as long as a normal human. So there's a lot of genetic experimentation gone on by the aliens that have not really worked out, in that they can probably use these beings for a number of tasks and responsibilities, but they can't integrate into human society because they'd be too obvious. They're too obviously strange. Whereas the ones that are allegedly integrating in society look exactly like us. They're the right size, the right height, all their fingers are the right length. They look like regular people in every way, except they have this innate mental capacity to control us to some degree.
Well, whatever this is about, I think that we have a way out. We must, or they would not have kept it secret all this time. So I think that we have some sort of kryptonite, some advantage, something. Any idea what that might
kryptonite?
Be? Yeah. Like
I see the analogy. Yeah. Let's hope so. Let's hope so.
Any guesses as to what it might be?
No, not really.
I have one.
I mean, yeah.
I have only one, and I'm not saying that it's right. But I think
would you share with us?
So I tend to be a rose-colored glasses kind of girl. So, but I think
a glass half full girl.
Yes, for
not
sure.
A glass half empty girl. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that they don't have is empathy.
Mm.
compassion, love, those kinds of things. And I think that must be a very dangerous thing for them.
I think they try, but they don't do it well.
Yeah.
They're not good at it.
Yeah.
They do try sometimes. They're just not good at it. Mm.
Yeah. I mean,
Their loyalty is always their loyalty is always somewhere else.
I think they can manufacture it like
Yeah.
make you feel like, oh, you're so special, I love you.
Yeah.
And you receive it in that way, but I suspect it's canned, it's manufactured, it's not the real thing. And
Mm.
I don't know. That's what I'm going with until I have other information.
Yeah.
I think it's good
Okay.
to have hope.
Yes. You must always have hope. You must always have hope.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Steve Aspin, author
Okay.
of Out of Time. Be sure to check out his website, outoftimebook.info. And I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Laura. See you again.